Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Once again, we are going to talk about Afghan situation because at this moment, still we are not very clear what kind of government is going to form. We have been seeing statements coming from Afghan Taliban, their various leaders, that it is going to be an emirate. It is not going to be a republic. It is not going to be a democracy, but there will be all-inclusive shura, which will be governing the country. So this is one aspect which is quite intriguing. On the other side, there are two or three things that continue to unfold. One is evacuation. It still continues, and we realize that HKaya, that is Hamid Karzai International Airport, is still a place where a lot of bedlam still exists. And of course, the Taliban have not formally taken over the power. So wherever they are policing, Western media keeps on complaining that it is messy and they are very aggressive young Talib who keep on frightening them or something like that. But that is one aspect. On the other side, of course, the dialogue process continues. It is said that the interaction between Hamid Karzai, Abdullah and the Afghan Taliban continues as well. There are many questions that we are going to ask. On the other side, the issue of economics is important as well, because you look at the circumstances and you realize, one, America has frozen Afghanistan's foreign currency reserves that were lying in New York. On the other side, IMF has also announced that they are blocking the emergency facility available to Afghanistan, and of course that includes the tranche that was expected, somewhere around $500 million. But what exactly does this mean? We have to ask this question as well. And in the end, one question that intrigues me a lot. Yesterday, you must have heard our guest who was saying that it has been 80 hours. At that time, it was 80 hours. Now it has increased substantially, add another 24 hours, that Afghan Taliban have not formed the government. On one side, it shows that it is indicative of their readiness to do it right this time. But on the other side, there is also a concern that they might be actually allowing the forces of chaos to prevail, because whenever there is no central government, there is always a possibility that the elements that want to exploit the circumstances will do so. We are going to talk about all these matters and more in order to help us understand these issues. In the studio, I am joined by Air Vice Marshal retired Ikramullah Bhatti Sahab, who is a defense analyst of renown, regular on this channel. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Irfan Ghori Sahab, a senior journalist, joins us on Skype. Do realize that today is Ashura's day, so not everyone is mobile. Irfan Ghori Sahab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Hussain Shahid Suharwardi Sahab, an expert on foreign affairs, a teacher, a professor, also joins us. Suharwardi Sahab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program as well. With your permission, gentlemen, I'm going to start with the studio. Air Vice Marshal Sahab, which one is it? Actually, rushing is bad, and that's why it is good that Afghan Taliban are taking their sweet time, or is it creating a vacuum of power at the top?
Well, of course, the vacuum exists, and I think Taliban are fully aware and cognizant of the fact that they will have to come up with a dispensation which is acceptable to the world. And at the same time, it should be acceptable to the Afghan people, because without this, I think it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for them to sustain their position in the country. This will, if they are able to form a government which is acceptable both at home and abroad, Afghanistan hopefully will become peaceful. And there will be, of course, greater readiness and willingness from the world at large, these financial institutions and other big countries to come forward and help in reconstruction and rehabilitation of the country.
Right. That will happen after there is any kind of legitimacy granted to the new government?
Definitely. And I think that is why they're taking this time. And of course, they want to come up with a situation or with a formula which is acceptable. And we also know that they have not been sitting idle. Their negotiations are going on, and they are. Of course, they haven't given a timeline, but of course, they are going to come up, and they understand this very well, the urgency and the importance of this solution that they have to come up with.
Right.
And well, it is an uphill task because the stakeholders are many, and each one of them at the outset would like to demand as much a chunk of power as they can catch hold of.
Right. As I come back to you, sir, I'm going to ask you about these stakeholders, because at this moment it seems that actual stakeholders are only Taliban. The rest don't have any negotiating power, although they want to be part of the system. Let me go to Sarwadi Saab. Sarwadi Saab, the same question to you, sir. One, are the Afghan Taliban wasting precious time in forming government, or it actually shows you that they have learnt a lot and they want to do it right this time? And then I have to ask you about what Sergei Lavrov actually said, the foreign minister of Russia, that 100% of Afghanistan is not in control of Afghan Taliban. But sir, first question first. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Say this thing that it's the fifth day that Taliban are in power, but not in government. They have yet to form the government, and the reasons are different. I don't know what when you spoke. I don't know which stakeholders a person is mentioning. Because at the moment, only one stakeholder in Taliban. Who are moving very gingerly, as we say in English, very carefully and very slowly. Why is it so? The reason is that we always are saying for the last few years, if not in the last 5 days, that they are reflecting prematurely. So they are taking time, but they want to make established, strong, comprehensive, and inclusive government. Now, what this inclusive government means? It means that there are certain people at the moment in Kabul, as well as in Arg. When I say Arg, I mean the presidential palace. Local language presidential palace is called Arg. There are certain people who are helping them, assisting them, and these people are Dr. Abdullah, Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, and the third one is Hamid Karzai. All three are very important people at the moment, and they are in contact with them, and they are urging upon it that there must be an inclusive government in which they are asking for their own role. However, Taliban regime at the moment, the top brass, when I say regime, I don't mean that somebody's elected or selected amongst them. I mean the top brass leadership at the moment is also asking for inclusion of certain other groups, especially non-Pashtuns, so that they may give a reflection to the entire world that we are not the Pashtun people who are in government, we are the representation of the entire Afghanistan. And two last points that, Pitafi, I would really like to bring into the notice of my audience, and that is that Loya Jirga is very important, because at the moment Taliban are asking for a new constitution, they are asking for a new setup, they are asking for a complete new overhauling of the system. And for that matter, legally speaking, ethically speaking, constitutionally speaking, Taliban have to convene Loya Jirga, the Mashran, the Elders Council, so that they may consult them as well. So that is there in Kabul at the moment, strongly thought about when to convene Loya Jirga. And the last thing is that this government that Taliban are trying to form must be inclusive. For that matter, they want to have some role of they want to have role of non-Pashtun belt of Afghanistan, so that they may give a reflection to the entire world that they are worthy of being recognized as legitimate government of Afghanistan for the future.
Right. That is a very important point, Irfan Wari Saab. I will bring the same question to you. In the past 24 hours, look at what has already happened. We have seen Ashraf Ghani resurfacing and actually making a statement, although he supported the process. On the other side, we have heard of former first vice president actually trying to reorganize in the Panjshir Valley. So is the time not of essence? Is it not important to form a government immediately so that some kind of negotiations with the world can also start?
Yes, Farrukh, thank you very much. Taking forward the conversation here, I agree that there can be, the Taliban this time are what seems to be, the different version of Taliban where, they are ready to accommodate the women in all walks of life, as they have said. Also, they have announced amnesty and for all those who had worked for the previous government or for the Americans or what they call the invaders. But at the same time, I think one aspect is, which I suspect is that even the Taliban, they might not have been, thinking that they would be in such a, lightning speed the way they have overtaken, most of Afghanistan, especially the capital Kabul. If you remember, till 1 week back, the assessments that were coming from the United States and from the other countries was that it might take them maybe months. At least, if and the last one was that might take them 90 days at least to come close to Kabul. But what we have seen was that the Afghan forces, they just abdicated everything and they handed over everything to the Taliban and they came there. Now the question is, and yes, we all, Pakistan, the official statements that have been coming from Pakistani side and other countries as well, that we want an inclusive, political settlement. But remember that in Afghanistan, forging unity is not an easy task, given that these same people, they had been fighting till few days back. And there are so many ethnicities and there are so many groups, and the still and the fragility of the Afghan system that we have seen in the past few days. So
Right.
it is a very daunting task for Taliban as well, that how whom to include, whom to exclude. Like you have mentioned in your question that their vice president, he has been supporting the protest today. Some flag waving protests, they were held in different cities. I think there was this protest in Kabul, in Jalalabad, in I think in Khost and other cities, where there are reports. I don't know if they are because so much is going on social media, but there are reports of killings as well. And
Right.
he's supporting those protests. So that means that the time that is being consumed, the time that is being wasted, it is going to might create a situation where it would be, in initial 1 2 days we had seen that it was a peace and everything, but now the people are coming out in the streets, which is unprecedented in Afghanistan. Last time when we saw that when the Taliban came, it was bloodshed and all that. But this time it was a peaceful, without much violence. They came to, they came to Kabul and captured that. But now what they are facing is, the pockets where they are facing these resistance.
Right. Wari Sahab, I wanted to actually cross-examine this argument that Afghan Taliban were not ready, or perhaps they were taken by surprise. I understand that the US might be misinformed because of the nature of Afghan government or Afghan forces. But I'm sure Afghan Taliban, if they were cutting deals with any of the defense forces, they would know what speed it is going to be. And then EVM Saab, with due respect, they have been actually in parlays for quite some time. So at that time in Doha, they must have come up with some kind of structure some kind of constitutional framework, what exactly they want?
Obviously, this is understandable that it's been nearly 3 years that the talks between Taliban and USA began in 2018.
Yeah.
And ever since then, the Taliban could sense that eventually they are going to come back into controlling their own country.
Yeah.
And they had that much of head start. And they must have been working on as to how would they go about this time, because
Right.
they have an experience of 5 years of earlier rule to 96 to 2001, and thereafter for 20 years while they have been fighting, they were fighting to actually regain power or liberate their country and come back to it. But the fact is that Taliban are mostly Pashtun. Pashtun are around 45 to 50%.
Right.
And the rest of the countries, of course, other ethnicities, Tajik, Hazara and others. And they also now understand that last time around they could not sustain themselves because they did not have legitimacy. They did not have acceptance. And this time around, this is the first thing that they would be looking forward to. And for that, they have to accept the norms of this world.
Right.
How to be acceptable to the rest of the world. And yet, of course, they have their own fighters and they have to keep their aspirations also in mind, and they have their own cultural traditions and values, and they also have to be kept in mind. So I think while they were engaging in this negotiations with the Americans, they must have been working as to how would they go about setting up the new governance model.
Yeah.
And we also know that they have been speaking with the Chinese, with the Russians, and also initially with the people from Afghanistan, the notables who were not in the Kabul government. They have been negotiating with them, and then eventually they started to negotiate with the Kabul government as well, minus Ashraf Ghani.
Right.
So they must have identified as to how will they go about it. But now that they have to actually create it and set it up, they have to, of course, tighten the last screws. They have to be very sure that whatever they come up with is acceptable. So I think it will take a few days for them to eventually develop a model which is acceptable.
How many days? Do we have a timeline?
Well, I think they should be able to do it within next week or so, because otherwise it will be, it will lead to more chaos in the country.
Right.
A sample of which is already visible.
All right.
And which will
because
go
of
against them.
Amrullah Saleh or something else?
Essentially, in the forefront, we have only Amrullah Saleh.
Yeah.
And while the incident in Jalalabad had nothing to do with the one in the north,
Yeah.
but it will be very useful for Amrullah Saleh to exploit it.
Yeah, because it was a row over flags.
Yes.
The old flag. I don't know whether it is going to be detained or not, but it is going to be quite an important thing. Do you want to comment on Sergei Lavrov's statement as well?
Well, yes, while we have a statement from Amrullah Saleh, but at the same time, Taliban are in negotiations with the previous leadership of the Northern Alliance.
Yeah.
And they would definitely like to accommodate them in whatever new setup that gets created. And if they are able to satisfy them, accommodate them to whatever they demand, which the Taliban would like to, because without that they cannot bring about harmony and peace in the country.
Right.
So I think in my view, Taliban would be able to settle this with them, and this the campaign the Amrullah Saleh is wanting to pursue, it probably would lose its steam.
Okay. That is also important because when you look at Indian channels, when you have seen the statement coming from Lavrov, they actually indicate that something might be cooking. But let me go back to Hussain Shahid Sohrawardi Sahab. Sir, once again, one aspect that has been pointed out, the difference between the first time Afghan Taliban took over Kabul in 1996 and today is this time they inherited quite an infrastructure. Roads are there, electricity is there, buildings are there. And in order to actually maintain all that, they will be needing cash, money, governance, everything. Now the question is, on one side, they have been an insurgent force for past 20 years. And now they have to transform into A, a political group, B, a political system. Will it be easy, sir?
That's a very good. I believe this is the high time that they must now shift from their mode from this militant organization to a political organization. That has been the demand of numerous political commentators for the past 20 years, that they must move on, they must contest elections, and with that come into the mainstream of Afghan politics. But they were hesitating, and they were stating that country has been subjugated by foreign troops and we have to liberate the country. And finally, as per their notion, country is liberated. Now the question is that what they are asking at the moment is this shift, is that possible? Pitafi, remember that we say this thing in political science, that we learn from history, that do not learn from history. In 1857, when British Raj, they came over, they disbanded British Army. Later on, that British Army really became pain in the neck for them. So was the case with the Americans. When they came to Iraq, they disbanded the army, and that disbanded army really became a hard nut to crack for Americans. I believe this is the high time Taliban must learn from them. They must not disband the Afghan army that was already there with them. I think they have to give command to the Taliban leadership, the Taliban militant top brass, as was the case once upon a time with Rashid Dostum, with General Fahim. I mean, he was just an ordinary soldier, he was just an ordinary mujahid, but later on they become general and field marshal and kind of stuff. So that they can do, but disbanding the Afghan army, that would really be very expensive for Taliban. One thing. Second thing, for governance, it's very important that the government that they are going to form must be inclusive. It must be accommodated by all the factions that had fought in the past. Imagine at the moment in Kabul, in presidential palace, Hamid Karzai is there, Abdullah is there, and Hikmatyar are there, and they had fought with them. So if they can accommodate these three, they can accommodate, this means anyone. So it is wonderful approach that they are moving on with accommodation rather than confrontation. However, this, as far as Amrullah Saleh's campaign is concerned, if non-Pashtun people are accommodated, if the way they are dealing with it, girls' schools, with Kabul University, the way they dealt with that in the past 5 years, the way they dealt with the media and the role of women in that, this was something really tolerant that people were not expecting from the Taliban. So right, that was something really hard.
But Professor Sorwati, I want to actually take you back to what you said earlier. You were talking about the integration of Afghan forces with the Taliban forces. They have been fighting among themselves. You know, there's 20 years of history. Secondly, how do you actually meld it? Because Afghan Taliban would seek or continue to seek the strength from their armored force. And then there are these soldiers who have been battling them. And of course, they have been, when you talk about their narrative, it was primarily against Afghan Taliban. So how do you actually merge the two?
That's a very good question, really. For the education of our audience, this is really important. Remember, just 3 years back, 5 years back, there was a time when there was a peace effort and they both agreed not to fight against each other. And in those days, because of Eid days, both forces were praying in the same mosque. And then they were meeting and embracing each other. I mean, they were distributing sweets as well. This means that the fight was only at ideological basis, but that was not that personal. So I believe that if that was not that personal, this means that this can be accommodated. One thing. Second thing, imagine the way Taliban, they reached to the gates of Kabul Afghan army was not fighting with them because they realized that, well, the game is over. So this means that they are not taking it personal. It was purely ideological. The moment they will realize that, well, some kind of amalgamation is going to take place, everything will go dandy dandy. Everything will go acceptable by the Afghan army as well as by the Taliban soldiers and the military and the Taliban militant command.
Right. This is important. Irfan Ghari Saab, do you want to come in and talk about this potential integration of the two forces? One, which is at this moment in suspended animation. On books, at least, it is 350,000 strong. I don't know how many actually are there. And then there is the Afghan Taliban force, which is also of 50 to 60,000 strong.
Yes, Farrukh, I think it's very important in Taliban. I hope and that they also realize that getting legitimacy from the international community, that is very important for them as well, because now we are not in the era of 90s. We are sitting in 2021. So for them, I mean, and the talks that were going on in Doha till 11th, 10th, and 11th of August before they reached Kabul, they were for inclusion of different ethnicities. I mean, because in Afghanistan is a very a very complex country where it would be, I mean, not an easy task that you would be all the ethnicities and all the warlords, and they can be, but still they would have to try to accommodate most of the people. And I think more than the military, yes, military is one aspect, but more than that is the in the political system, they should have representation. And for that, the regional players, they would also have to, and the international community, this is also a time that they should also, I mean, play a part where it should be a convergence of interests, because, when it comes to Pakistan, when it comes to US, when it comes to China, when it comes to Russia, our main goal should be that a peaceful Afghanistan, which should not, I mean, we had complaints that the Afghan side is used against us, and the US, they came there for, against the militancy and the extremism and terrorism. Similar were the complaints of the Russians, the Chinese. So now it is time that Afghanistan should become a place of convergence of interest, at least that it should be a stable country, instead of, in the past, in the world, I mean, when it came to the, I mean, the games of the international, the world players, where Afghanistan was used, they were using Afghanistan to influence it, and then, on the world stage, getting their places. We have seen in the past the Russian and the Cold War, and then in this time as well. So one is, of course, yes, the Taliban, they and at the same time, we know that in Afghanistan, the groups that are there, they are certainly, Taliban have certainly an edge, because of, they are in Kabul, they have come to, I mean, they are the ones, the dominating force there. But the other players, the regional powers, they have influence on them as well, so they also have to come up, because what we have been seeing is that internationally, on international media and in Indian channels and some Western media, it is Pakistan that is being pressurized, and that is being blamed, that it should be the Pakistan should be forcing this, Pakistan should be forcing that on Taliban.
Not Western media, not Western media now. It is primarily Indian media. Yeah, Western media is at this moment critiquing Joseph Biden and his administration. Yeah.
Yes, but you would have seen the interview that was, of our ambassador in Washington by, today's interview by Foreign Policy magazine. They were, again asking him that what role ISI can play, what role Pakistan can play to bring them, because it is now had we been, we have to make it clear that Taliban are not on our payroll, and especially when they have come to power now, they have the power, they have, though they do not have a legitimacy, but they are the force which is controlling most of Afghanistan now. So the regional players, the international community, they would also have to help them out to, to bring stability and, a working government in Afghanistan.
Right. Regarding that point about Pakistan being framed, I understand that Indian media keeps on trying to do it, but that is perhaps why nobody takes Indian media seriously any longer. Regarding Pakistan's cooperation, AVM Sahab, this is very interesting. I spoke to many journalists in the West, and they said that because Pakistan was being very transparent and kept on cooperating with the American authorities and international community, the Western media has learned that Pakistan actually didn't harbor any secret game. But regardless of that, perhaps you are the most pertinent man here in this forum to talk about this merger of two forces of the Afghan standing army, or now it is sitting army, and then the Taliban forces. And in order to do that, I will need a very comprehensive answer from you. You'll have to talk also why the forces failed. Was it because of their lack of capacity, or because that was merely of some kind of instruction that came from their leadership, or some kind of deal that was cut? Because tomorrow, they, like Ba'athist joined ISIS, there can be something of that sort as well.
Our viewers would understand and agree that a military force or a regular armed force, for it to have any worthwhile combat potential, there ought to be certain prerequisites or mandatory items, such as their character, values, traditions, their morale, their motivation, and the leadership, and of course, above all, the will to fight and the purpose for which they are fighting. When we look at the Afghani National Defense and Security Forces, they were created by the Americans. There was ethnic issues on their composition and selection.
Yeah, less Pashtuns in it. Yeah.
And of course, they were trained, they're equipped by them, and we also realized that they had no motivation, and they had little nobility in the cause for which they were created, because they were created by an occupation force. And we also know, I was reading a report that while the figure is 300,000 for the armed forces and maybe 50,000 for the police, according to that report, maybe half of those did not exist.
Okay.
They
On
were
paper,
they were ghost soldiers, and the commanders were drawing their salary. And the troops also did not have any faith or trust or respect for their commanders, because they knew the corruption that was going on. So they had little to fight for. And towards the end, in the last couple of months, they were not even getting their salaries.
Right. And there was desertion rate was high.
Very, very high.
Yeah.
And it is also said that ever since this negotiation process started between the Taliban and the US, the troops of this force, they could sense that they are going to be abandoned in due course of time. So their morale also
was totally touching the floor.
Absolutely.
Right. That makes sense. So that would mean that their capacity was there. It is intact. You can take from a soldier weapons you can take, but you cannot take away the training. Now they're there. Today there is no incentive to fight Taliban. Tomorrow there might be some incentive. So how important it is for the Afghan Taliban to try to actually absorb them? And secondly, is that even possible?
That is quite possible. You see, while you see where I said that some of the very basic ingredients in the combat potential of any force is their values, their traditions, their culture. and the leadership. I think Taliban are, while they may be having different ethnicities, they may not be heterogeneous, but of course they belong to this society, they belong to Afghanistan, and these people, these tribes have been living together for centuries. And
fighting for centuries.
And you see, while the Afghan National Army was fighting against the Taliban, we also know that, as was just mentioned, that whenever there was a moment of peace, they like to rejoice together and get together. So they are longing for that situation. So I think it will be easier for Taliban.
That rejoicing was organic, or was it a photo op?
No, I think it was organic, because you could see that people were naturally getting together and embracing each other and celebrating that occasion, celebrating peace. So I think it will be in the interest of peace in Afghanistan that the armed forces personnel are of course brought back into their barracks, they are brought back into their uniform, they are brought back, and of course the Taliban are merged into them, and it will be a very difficult and a challenging effort, but it can be done.
Right.
It can be done, and there is no other way out. I think if they have to bring peace, they'll have to withdraw all the weapons from other than the regular army and police.
Yeah.
And
they have been doing that.
They have been doing that, and they have done that earlier on. Yeah. So I think the best way forward would be, of course, to get them together again and continue to let them function. But the more challenging part would be maintaining their morale and motivation, and of course paying their salaries.
Right.
Getting money from...
First of all, they'll have to actually get access to their own money, and then they can do it. And then there is the question of foreign debt. Afghanistan is under $7 billion, foreign debt of what, $7 billion. So they'll have to pay that as well. Is there a possibility, Sarwardi Saab, that Afghan Taliban may say that the country that owed you all that money does not exist, we are an emirate, we are not going to pay you at all? And in that case, what happens to the money that is owed to them?
Good turn in this discussion, and that we have turned now towards economics. Just before answering this question, remember that foreign policy is the reflection of a country's domestic policy. All countries, how they would respond to Taliban, it depends on how Taliban function inside Afghanistan. What would be the model of governance that they would adopt? How tolerant will they be subsequently? Initially, in the last 5 days, they have remained very conducive, very acceptable, but we need to see, and that is the reason that every country in the world is stating that they would wait and see, and then they will proceed further. Coming back to your question, let me say this thing, and let me tell you that Afghanistan's economy is of $6 billion. $6 billion total economy every year. That is what Afghanistan's economy is. And till yesterday, when Americans were there in Afghanistan, they were spending $6 billion for salaries and all stuff for just maintaining this Afghan National Defense Security Force, which means police, army, and air force, all of them together. And of course, then AVM Saab has also mentioned, I have a very good statistical data that 120,000 soldiers were ghost soldiers. They were not there existing at all, and their salaries were received by some people. So $6 billion of economy and $6 billion investment on every year on national army. This means that Taliban are direly in need of world economic support, which means IMF, World Bank, they have really a huge role to play in the running of Afghanistan. I'm not saying reconstruction and development, because reconstruction has already taken place a lot, and no such major war has taken place between Taliban and Afghan forces. So reconstruction in the last 20 years is it's a bonus for the Taliban. However, running the country needs a lot of money, and for that matter, Taliban have to show themselves to the entire world that they are the ones who who are worthy of running the country. In return, the world will definitely come over and they would assist Afghanistan economically. But till then, as I stated earlier, everything depends on how Taliban will move on. And for that matter, two very important questions, which were really a question of discussion and dispute in Doha, they are still there. And that is how the Taliban regime, forthcoming regime, will look at the role of women in the polity. And the second is what would be the system of government in the country. If it would be Sharia, what kind of Sharia Taliban would be propagating. If it is the same that was there during 1996, 2001, of course, then it would be a disaster. But the way in the last 5 days, the Taliban, the way in the last 5 days that they have shown themselves, that would be something that the world community will accept.
Right. I had a follow-up question for you, especially because, and I'm glad you mentioned economy. On one side, I understand that there are many moving parts in Afghan economy. On one side is the black economy, the smuggling that has been going on. On the other side is the endless possibility, because Afghan strategic location is such that it connects South Asia with Central Asia. Is there a possibility that in coming days we see more influx of trade if Afghan Taliban end up forming a stable government? And that's how the economy actually grows. And we still don't know what kind of economic model will they have. They keep on talking about Sharia. I understand that that means that they're not going to allow interests. But apart from interest or riba, what else is there? How do we know that they are ready to work with a modern Islamic economic model like Saudi Arabia or Iran for that matter?
That's a very good question once again, Pitafi. Let me answer the last question first. Instead of riba and interest, Taliban will go for musharika and mudariba. Both systems are there running in Saudi Arabia, they are there in Iran, and mudariba and musharika are perfectly fine systems as far as any Muslim country or as far as any country that wants to run interest-free banking as well as economics, then that they will do. So mudariba and musharika will be the ones that they would proceed further with. And the last thing is that and the first question that you have asked, let me tell you this thing, that in the last 5 days, the moment Taliban came in Kabul, I'm not saying in government, in Kabul, Chaman border was opened and the Torkham border was opened. All Central Asian republics gates where the trucks were parked for 800 at Torkham, it is stated, everything was permitted to get in. This means that they know that this is the high time, get the things done, and they must get in so that we may have that support. So I believe Taliban are especially focusing on neighboring countries, trade with each other. That would be what would be the backbone of them, so that they may move smoothly.
I'm told that we have to conclude the program, and I'm told that we have to actually practically conclude the program, because I'm not going to give any conclusion. I'm very quickly going to ask Waheed if he wants to slip in a couple of lines before we end. Very quickly, sir.
Yes, Pitafi, I think what we have been hearing from Taliban, I mean, the assurances and all that, it would be, they say the taste of the pudding is in the eating. So when it comes to the women rights, I mean, when they are saying that they would be within the framework of Islam, I mean, now it would be up to the interpretation of that, but how they assume what would be that interpretation. Similarly, the concerns, like Pakistan has always the concerns of TTP, and today, I think yesterday, there was a statement from Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, I mean, they reassuring their allegiance with the Taliban. Similarly, disassociating clearly from Al-Qaeda and all those, I mean, things other than the economic front and what we have discussed.
Waheed actually denounced TTP yesterday, Sohail Shaheen, in one of the programs in Pakistan. So that is good news for Pakistan. I'm told that we have to go absolutely end the program here. Irfan Hori sir, thank you very much, sir, for your participation, valuable time. Hussain Syed sir, Suarwardi sir, great having you in the show. Air Vice Marshal retired Ikramullah Bhatti sir, always great having you in the show as well. Viewers, this was today's show. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.